Um, okay, so we are getting close to our time. So this question comes up a lot because this particular potential therapy has had a lot of news coverage lately, but it's about the vaccine. So the question is, I've heard about a vaccine
Mhm.
being developed for TNBC. Can you provide more information on its current status and how it works?
Yeah, I would be happy to. And so to just do some level setting, I just want to describe the typical three sort of phases of clinical trials, because that helps to understand what we're hoping to get out of a study when you're analyzing whether this seems like something that's right for you. So studies are categorized as phase one, two, or three. A phase one study takes a compound, a drug, an intervention, whatever it might be, that has a really great scientific rationale and maybe some laboratory data that would suggest it has benefit. And it is the first time it is being used in people. And the goal is to really determine the right dose to use and the safety of that intervention. So oftentimes the dose is escalated in phase one studies, and the focus is all about safety. And sometimes phase one studies are done when you're combining two drugs. So you might know a whole lot about each drug when it's given by itself, but you need to understand what happens when you combine these two drugs, find the right dose. That's a phase one study. They are usually small in number of patients that are recruited. Sometimes they're open to any kind of tumor type, and they are usually very permissive in terms of prior lines of chemotherapy that someone may have received. But it is really impossible to make any kind of definitive determination about activity and benefit and efficacy in a phase one study. But you can sometimes start to get a signal if something looks encouraging, if patients actually are responding to a drug in a phase one trial. That gives us a hint that this may actually really work when used at the right dose. And that informs moving on to the phase two studies. Phase two trials are there to see, does this intervention have activity in a specific disease type? And there are normally parameters placed. So here you might have an exciting drug. We're going to only study it in breast cancer. We are only going to study it in triple negative breast cancer because there's a good reason that's where it's going to work. And we might even require that you have a certain biomarker, right? The tumor has to have a mutation to guide testing this particular drug because it targets that mutation. Phase two studies generally will have about anywhere from maybe 30 patients to 100 or so patients. So open to more women in a unique subset of disease. And that is where you start to see, does this drug really have activity? What's the response rate in the tumor? Are women living a bit longer without the breast cancer acting up? If that is positive and shows encouraging data, the gold standard next kind of trial is a phase three study. And a phase three trial is the kind of data we need to go to the FDA and say, this new drug works better than standard. So phase three trials are often randomized studies. We can't control which arm of the study a woman is recruited to. That's done almost like a flip of a coin by a computer. But it is taking that new investigational drug and comparing it to the existing standard of care. Those phase three studies are often recruiting hundreds of women, maybe thousands of women, and they're often going on around the United States and around the world. Those are really important trials to be able to get the data we need to get an FDA approval to get a drug into our patients' hands. So when you ask about vaccines, they are super interesting in concept. The idea is that we can design or engineer a vaccine just as you do to prevent getting sick from an infection, to train our own body's immune system to what the breast cancer looks like. And if microscopically anything starts to act up, our body's immune system is even better at detecting that than any blood test or any scan, and it could work to keep it under control. So that's kind of the concept of how these are all being designed, and different vaccines are engineered against different markers that are on breast cancer cells. Right now, much of the work that has been done about vaccines has been either in the lab or very early phase studies, those safety studies of injecting a vaccine and finding out what's the right dose to deliver. What are the side effects that happen when we start to manipulate the immune system? And where we have seen early exciting data is that there have been these anecdotal experiences of folks having prolonged great outcomes. So that's the kind of enthusiastic signal, what we call hypothesis generating, to drive moving those studies to the next phase. So I love when the news raises awareness about the exciting things going on in breast cancer, but have conversations with your doctor about whether you meet what some of the criteria are for these ongoing studies and vaccines. They're still pretty early.
Okay, and so am I understanding correctly, that they're really just recruiting women with or maybe men with metastatic disease right now, or is it both early?
Not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. So there are studies looking at women, there's vaccine studies looking at women who have triple negative breast cancer and a BRCA mutation, and they have no evidence of disease, but they're studying the vaccine in that setting. There are vaccine studies looking at women who have had triple negative, early stage triple negative breast cancer and are on their adjuvant immunotherapy, and they want to see if the vaccine helps that work better. And there's lots of different cohorts, and that's where I would use some of these clinical trial matching services or reach out to the investigative team leading the trial to say, am I eligible? Do I meet the criteria for consideration?